Hello and welcome to the Providence College Podcast. I'm your host, Liz Kay, and I'm joined by producer Chris Judge of the class of 2005. Here on the Providence College Podcast, we bring you interesting stories from the Friar family. This week, we're joined by Kelly Roosa Cohen, who graduated from Providence College in 2000. She started out as a realtor and later became a real estate instructor and a certified real estate mediator. Cohen then spent nearly a decade as vice president of a title and closing company before founding one of her own. Cohen Closing Title now has 5 locations in New Hampshire and Maine. In 2021, the New Hampshire Business Review named Cohen and her company a Business Excellence Award winner in the real estate and construction category. Kelly, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm psyched to be here.
So how did you get started in real estate?
Great question. So my mom has actually been in real estate for a very long time. She sold real estate when my brother, sister, and I were little. And then she moved into the teaching aspect of real estate, and she currently owns a real estate school. So that's for folks to take a course, take a test, and then get their license. And then she, up until recently, scaling back in retirement, and she was teaching some real estate education CEU classes. So I sort of started, we always joke around that my sister and brother and I, we talk real estate, all day, every day at the house. It's like we didn't read Goodnight Mood. We read this big real estate textbook, right? Like we knew all the lingo. So it was pretty just sort of an easy transition for my brother, sister, and I to at least get our license. We didn't necessarily know what we'd do with it, but my mom always advocated that having a real estate license was, whether or not you were using it to sell real estate, was something that would be really important, whether you were going to buy a house one day or just understand the real estate market, the financial institutions and sectors. But interestingly enough, when I was at Providence, I worked to create a buyer program through the outreach community project down in Providence. There was downtown, there was a group that had folks coming in and out just to learn different things. There was a financial advisor that was talking about balancing a checkbook. And I was able to work on a buyer program, what to know about the real estate market. And my mom was certainly instrumental in helping me with that. So there has been a little bit of a taste of it, and enough that I knew that it was something I wanted to do something with. So I started selling real estate as a licensed broker, and then quickly realized that my brain is a lot more of like a black and white, right? Like I see things as right and wrong, sometimes to a fault, if you ask my kids. I don't love the gray area, like living in the gray area. And brokerage and real estate, there is a lot of gray area. What's going to happen in a transaction? What will the seller think? What will the buyer think? What decisions will they make? And when you're in that brokerage platform, that just didn't work a lot for my personality, my brain, and the title part of it, and the closing and the settlement part. So that's the part where you're finished through the transaction and you're now signing all the paperwork, right? So myself and my company are the ones that handle all of that paperwork preparation and the actual closing experience. And all of that is very black and white. It's like your title is clear, your title is Cohen Title and Closing. This is your interest rate. This is not your interest rate. And I had then in real estate, a lot of that with more order. I left too late for my and worked and doing pre-license school for her for years. And then I worked for a local title company for 10 years, a fantastic company that was affiliated with a large real estate company. And for 10 years, I loved it, enjoyed it, learned so much about it. But I always felt like maybe there was more that I could do on my own. And, I think that sometimes when you're making a lot of decisions, you want to make sure that, the decisions that you're making are all the ones that you would implement, that you would decide. And I sort of had this itch to maybe do something beyond just the company in which I was working for, right? So my husband and I, he works for Cintas Corporation. They sell luxury items like mats and mops and toilet paper and bathroom products and uniforms. So he had quite a busy schedule, traveled quite a bit, and our sons were 3 and 5 at the time. And I always sort of said, you know what, as much as I'd love to start a company, I have 2 small kids, I have a husband that travels, I want to wash my hair sometimes and maybe jump on the treadmill. So I just don't think it's in the cards for me. And then, a couple of years of thinking that, I thought, you know what, how could I not start a company? I have so much of a love and desire for what we do. And why wouldn't I want to show my boys that you can, work really hard and have something that is yours, and the decisions that you make become ones that you can be proud of. And if they're decisions that were the ones that should have been made, you can make changes to it, right? It's something that you own. It's something that you can control. So in 2015, I opened up Cohen.
Walk us through the evolution of your company and how it's grown.
Oh my goodness. So the real estate market in the past 8 years has been Looney Tuneville. Okay. So the real estate market has been on fire, right? So, which in some ways you would think that would be the most amazing thing ever, but that's also really tough to scale, especially when you're starting a business. And I've always been one that believes in smart growth, because if you grow too quickly, too soon, then you lost a lot of the foundation in which you built the company on originally, right? So two foundations and principles that I built this company on are a book. One of the book is Raving Fans. It's a fantastic book. It talks a lot about how just having good customer service is not enough anymore. You literally have to create raving fans, people that don't want to work with anybody else but you, and they want all their family and friends to tell everybody about you, right? And you can't do that unless you have a core staff and team that abides by all those principles, right? And then the next piece that I sort of worked with and really sort of hit home for me is this principle called 212. It's a real skinny, thin book. You can read it in like 20 minutes. If you Google 212, there's a pretty cool video on it. I think the last time I looked, it's still the same video from like 1981. So it's grainy, the quality's terrible, but the message is awesome. And it basically states that it's a 212 principle. Okay. So at 211 degrees, water is really hot. But then when you add steam, water boils at 212. Right? So it's basically like taking a look at both your professional life and your personal life. What can you do in that 1 degree differential that takes yourself from hot water to boiling water, right? What's that 1 degree difference that you can do in your personal life and you can do in your professional life that will get you to that extra degree? So everything I do at Cohen is founded on a principle of what's my 212, right? What are the 212 initiatives that I can create here at the company that my team can implement, they can get excited about? We can have 212 awards. We talk about going 212. Sometimes we'll go 220. It's a principle, it's a lifestyle, right? And through these 212 experiences, we thus create raving fans, right? So that's sort of been our vision and our principle. And from that, I really believe that so much of the success of the company has grown from that, right? We have our two main offices, which are in Bedford, New Hampshire, and then on the seacoast in Hampton, New Hampshire. And then we have 3 other satellite offices. So five total. And honestly, the offices were opened out of the demand for folks that wanted to do closings with us, right? When I talked before about smart growth, I'm just never the type of person that is gonna, plant a seed, open up an office, put out a sign and be like, who wants to work with me, right? That I think I'd be dry heaving and hiving. That would not work. I have to make sure that the foundation's there and the demand is there and the want's there. So a lot of times I might rent like a suite or rent something very small, and just from the desire that originally occurred of folks wanting to work with us, see how that would grow. And from the growth, then I would, staff an office and grow from that office. So the organic growth and the natural growth, I think, is really important to the success of a business, rather than the opposite, you trying to create that, right?
And you described some of the challenges you faced as an entrepreneur.
Oh, how long is the podcast with this? So I would say that there's different challenges on different levels, right? So there are challenges professionally, there's challenges in the market, there's challenges of being a business owner in general, and then there's also challenges personally, right? So on a professional level, I think one of the biggest challenges for me is the pressure, right? There's the pressure that every decision I make not only affects myself and my family, but it affects the 40 people that work for me. It affects their families. It affects my clients. It affects my referral partners. So there's that pressure that I feel that I better make sure that what I'm doing is in the best interest of everybody, right? And in the best interest of the company. So, you face challenges, whether it's, the world shutting down and COVID happening, and people still need to learn, figure out how to buy and sell their houses without actually physically being with each other, right? And in the Northeast, we do what's called face-to-face closings most often, where you actually do meet buyers and sellers at a table and handle a closing. So that became really tricky to figure out, well, how are we going to do this? We're all not going to be in the same room, right? So just being able to navigate through those market changes, industry changes, economy changes, and just knowing the pressures that, every time I go to bed, I'm very conscious of the fact that, every decision I make not only affects myself, but everybody that works for me that's basically counting on me to steer the ship and steer it in the right direction, right? So I think from a professional standpoint, that's one of the biggest challenges that never goes away, right? It's always there. And then I think personally, it's being able to try to find that balance, right? Try to find the balance where you are taking care of yourself, that you are, putting yourself first, both, mentally and physically and spiritually and emotionally, because, if I'm not the best version of myself, I can't possibly lead the folks at Cohen. I can't possibly be the best mother I want to be, the wife I want to be, friend, sister, daughter. So I have to take care of myself and making sure that I'm staying in tune with that, right? When I feel that I've just given too much and I'm not pulling back enough or recharging. I talk a lot with the team here about the need to recharge, the need to figure out what do you need to do to recharge and when are you in life in need of recharging, right? So some weeks that balance is awesome. Some weeks I'm like, we are not doing well with that. So it's that's always sort of like a check-in for me.
I think your business is pretty interesting because it definitely has kind of diversified income streams. I mean, for example, your business offers those continuing education courses that you've offered. Was that kind of a priority from the start?
So I always loved the teaching part of it. I loved doing that buyer program that we did at Providence. I loved teaching for my mom. And I've always had this need to sort of be in the know on education-wise, what's happening in our states, what's happening with legislation, what's happening with, property owners and choices and land and development. So I've always had that desire to sort of be involved in that. And then I've always had a love of just education and collaborating and sharing that with others. So when I opened up Cohen, I knew I wanted to have some sort of an education component. So we are we've had 3 offices since I opened in 2015. And in the first office we opened, it was a real small space, but it still had room for 10 chairs in a classroom setting for students to come for CEU classes, because I knew right away that I wanted that to be a component of our brand and something that Cohen was really adamant about, which was providing educational opportunities for real estate agents, as well as lenders to sponsor those classes, to have one-on-one conversations with real estate agents that are students there. So as we grew and we moved into a second office, the classroom grew to 25. As we saw the need and the desire and the success of the classes. And then now we're in our permanent space here, building that I bought right before the pandemic. Not many people were buying commercial properties, but Kelly Cohen was, no worries there. And now our classroom holds 50. So it's definitely been part of our brand. We don't charge for the classes because what the class is designed to do is to provide an opportunity for me to teach based on things that are happening in the market, right? Timely information opportunities, whether it's wire fraud is the big one right now. It's horrifying how much fraud is happening as it relates to wires. And obviously, when you're doing a real estate transaction, there's quite a few funds that are transferred via wires. So that's sort of something that I'm spending a lot of time education on. But the classes are designed for exposure, right? And marketing and advertising for people to know who I am, who Cohen is, and what we provide for services and what they can expect if they chose to work with us.
Thinking about home buyers and home sellers, what are some of the biggest concerns that are facing these two different groups right now?
Right. So it's been an interesting cycle. And I always say cycle because that's exactly what we're in. It's another cycle, right? In the past, I would say maybe 10 plus years, if you were in real estate, you did pretty well, right? The rates were pretty low. And in the past 5 years, they were really, really, really low, historically really low. When COVID hit, there was a lot of movement. We actually had a lot of buyers that were from Massachusetts and New York and Rhode Island and Connecticut, all sort of migrating towards New Hampshire, southern Maine, all kinds of opportunity to work remotely. So have a choice of where you necessarily want to be. So I think that there was so much activity and there was so much that was happening. There could have been this false thought that if you were in real estate, you were doing really well, and that it was sort of an easier life than it actually really is, right? Because real estate is basically connected to so many different aspects, whether it's the economy, housing market. And I think that the recent shift we've seen is a really tough one because the rates have been going up and the sellers are not selling properties. So there's a huge inventory shortage, not just in New Hampshire and Maine in the states that I do business in, but the inventory shortage is nationwide. GMA Good Morning America just had a huge segment on the lack of properties and actually showed you a graph of different states and US, how many houses we need to build in order to keep up with the population and the growth of our country. I know New Hampshire stats, in the next 10 years, we need 61,000 properties to keep up with the growth. Otherwise, we're going to lose our people, right? So there's a huge inventory issue right now. And if you think about it, you've got a lot of buyers who are wanting to buy a house. A lot of that buying population are millennials that are looking to move forward with their lives. And they cannot find anything to buy, right? So you have a lot of sellers that aren't necessarily selling right now. One, because they wish they had sold maybe a year ago when the market was even higher, but they didn't, but they still think they can get that amount, which they can't. So they need to come down lower. Or they have a 2 or 3% rate. And if they sell that property and they buy a new property, they're going up into the higher rates in which we have right now. So it doesn't make sense for them to sell and buy something. So we're kind of in like a standoff. It's almost like a football field. All the buyers are standing on one side and all the sellers are standing on the seller side. Like when you're in dodgeball, like nobody's throwing the balls and you're just standing there. So something sort of has to give and happen. There's been a lot of talk in many states about growth and development. And there's builders that want to build and they want to create affordable housing and an opportunity for folks to stay in the states in which they're currently residing in. But there's a lot of towns that have really strict and tough zoning and ordinances. So for builders to be able to build something, it has to be on something that makes sense, right? And with the cost of materials and the cost of land, sometimes what they're given to build doesn't match up with affordability of what that state can really make work. So we're sort of at a standstill place, but it sounds doom and gloom. But let me just say that I actually, I welcome a little bit of the standstill. What I mean by that is through the past decade, if you were in real estate, like I said before, you were winning, right? But that didn't mean that you were maybe doing an amazing job. And it didn't mean that you really knew your stuff. It could also just mean that there was a lot of tailwind that was helping everybody do well, right? Like I mentioned before, the lower rates. So now I feel like we've sort of reverted back in a good way to the way business should be done, right? There's thoroughness, there's communication. When things were so busy, I even joke around that like our email language changed, right? Instead of like, "Hi Liz, hope you have a great day. Congratulations again on your upcoming purchase. Attached for the buyer documents that you need to review and sign for us. Please let us know if you have any questions," right? Instead it turned into like, "Liz, see attached," right? Or just Liz, attached. But it's like, that's not a great way to do business. And these are people's biggest investment of their lives. We need to be taking that with the utmost care and concern. And I do feel like this shift in market is allowing. And for me, that goes back to my raving fan mentality and my 212 experience. And I do believe that in markets like this, that service matters even more than it ever did before. So the real estate agents and the loan officers, they don't have maybe 10 and 15 closings a month like they might have had in years past. Maybe they have 2, right? And that's their mortgage payment. That's their child's tuition payment. So though that matters even more to them than it ever had before. And I welcome that challenge because I think 10 out of 10 will crush it every time.
So what advice do you have for people looking to buy in the near future? Should they stick it out? Should they hold out? What do you think?
I think they should stick it out. I think they should stick it out. I think that no matter what the economy, no matter what the market's happening, people, like, life happens. Like, life is happening, right? And you can't just halt your life and you can't just stop your life. But the reality of it is people are going to, they're going to get married, they're going to have children, they're going to grow their families. And then maybe on the not so exciting part, people are going to pass away, right? People go into assisted living. So there's still life that happens in any transition or cycle. So you just have to be more mindful of strategies and marketing, and probably working with the right agent, working with the right loan officer, right? I think we might go back to some traditional knocking on doors, writing letters. I love your neighborhood. I love your cul-de-sac. I love your street. My parents live 2 streets over. If you're ever considering selling, would you please give me a call? I think we're going to go back to a lot of like the back to basics way of doing real estate. But I don't think anybody should don't put up the white flag yet. I think that we should stick it out and growth is happening. I think development will happen. And honestly, I think we're seeing too that there's a lot of millennials that are our biggest buying population right now, and a lot of them are living with their parents, and their parents want them out of the house, and they want them to move on with their lives and have children and grandkids and all that. So you are seeing a lot of parents of adult children financially contributing to some of the home purchases and helping them to be able to, become the winning bidder of the property and help with the increase in the rates or the appraisal gap. So nobody should put up a white flag. Nope.
I'm also curious what advice you would give to current PC students or young alumni who are interested in getting started in real estate.
So I would say experience and learning and being a sponge. Because a lot of times, once you're in something, you are so focused on doing what you're in that you sometimes miss the boat of learning what to do once you're in it, right? So I would say that, when you're at PC has so many wonderful opportunities, right? Whether it's experiences, internships, work studies, any type of programs that you can get involved in that will give you some experience and insight into a field that you're looking to go into, and you can learn from that even before you actually step foot into that, right? So I think it's about mentorship, whether it's about finding folks that are doing something that you might be interested in and shadowing them and being part of that, and just getting as many life experiences outside of just the campus life to make sure that you're prepped and ready for that when you graduate.
So this feels like a great transition to talking about your time at PC. So you were a public and community service studies major. When you think back to your time in Friartown, what were some of those experiences you had that made an impact on you?
Oh, so many. I think one of the biggest things was, for me, the major itself was all about connections with the community. And it was all about social aspects and cultural aspects and how we as current students can learn what is going on outside of our walls on the campus and understand once we graduate, like, what's our role and how can we make a difference and what can we get involved in? And those sort of experiences for me were instrumental in me wanting to be a part of, whether it was the real estate world or some sort of community world where I was always involved in what was happening, right? At Cohen, we do a lot of charitable work. We do a lot of charity spotlights. So every 2 months, we have a charity spotlight, and usually it's a charity of one of the employees' choice, something that's very near and dear to them, and it's something that we are heavily involved in. I think that Providence and that particular Applied Science too, it gives you that exposure where you might have seen through high school and you might not have seen through college. It allows you to be a little bit more mindful and insightful of what you want to do after. So that was incredibly beneficial for me. We did a trip to New Orleans my junior year with a group from the class, and we painted an orphanage, a children's home in New Orleans. And I ended up loving Louisiana and New Orleans, and I moved there after I graduated with my PC roommate who ended up going to Tulane grad school, and I stayed down there for a couple of years before moving back. But it was experiences like that that allowed you to connect with other people outside of just the world in which you were living in, as well as see, socially and culturally and worldwide what are some of the issues out there and what are some of the things that I can help to be involved in my own community.
What are some of the courses you took as an undergrad that you feel help you in your work today?
I think sociology, that was probably one of the biggest ones. I felt like there's a lot of any of the classes for me that were collaboration, any of the classes that were broken up into groups, any of the classes that we had segments of books that we read, 1984, all these things, and then we would talk about them, right? And you've learned, and you were learning from people's different perspectives, but you also learned how to appreciate other people's point of views, which I think is huge in graduating and going into business and understanding how to work alongside different people and understand and respect different people coming from different walks of life.
So we're talking in March, which is Women's History Month. So we've been asking all of our podcast guests about the women who inspired them in their lives. How about you? Who was at the top of your list?
100% would be my mom. Watching her juggle the life of real estate as well as an educator and a teacher. I remember so vividly that when she started to open up a school and she was going to teach people to get their license, she did it in our kitchen area, and we had this little island with 4 bar stools, and one of the stools wasn't quite right, and she couldn't figure out how to just take a tool and tighten it. So she took that one away, and instead of having 4 students, she only had 3 to start. She was afraid that somebody would sit on that stool and get hurt, which is totally my mother. So she had 3 stools, and I remember that she had 3 students for quite some time. And then she moved into the dining room because she had 6 students that now were in the dining room. And I just remember being like, oh my gosh, she moved out of the kitchen. She's in the dining room. We had to be upstairs while she was teaching. And that just felt so she truly grew her business by 50% moving into the dining room, right? And then from there, she moved into real estate offices that she's taught in. But, now she teaches her crash weekend at Southern New Hampshire, with hundreds of people packed in their auditorium. So just watching that evolution of how to grow a business and how to grow a business with integrity and honesty and professionalism was incredibly impactful, probably more so than I can even put in words, all while watching her be a really good one.
Well, Kelly, it's been such a pleasure talking to you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. This was so fun.
Subscribe to the Providence College Podcast in all the usual places, including iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play, and Spotify, as well as your smart speaker. If you like what you hear, please review and share with others. Thanks for listening, and go Friars.